Hi, welcome to For Better for Verse, the podcast where a married couple, a theologian, and a philosopher take a look at the scriptures. I'm Justin Crisp.
I'm Jewelle Bickel, and today we are looking at Luke, most of chapter 19 and chapter 20.
So we're picking up with the Palm Sunday story, Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. We're going to look at some sayings of Jesus about Jerusalem, a difficult parable, potentially foretelling his death, his attempts to wriggle out of some difficult conversations
Yeah.
with the folks in charge, and then the end of the world.
No big
And
deal.
No big deal. No big deal. Just a little, light reading here at the end of the year. We are celebrating Advent here in the Episcopal Church at St. Barnabas Church in Backcountry Greenwich, our parish. It feels a little odd to be reading these texts during Advent and preparing for Christmas, but we'll have a little conversation about that towards the end, perhaps.
All right, sounds good.
So,
good.
to launch into the Palm Sunday story, Jesus has finally made his way to Jerusalem, as we've talked about quite a lot in the Gospel of Luke. He's set his face towards Jerusalem with determination for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a shorthand for Jesus sets his face towards his destiny, towards his death, and of course his resurrection on the other side. And here the action is really beginning, and he comes in a particular way.
Mhm.
What do you think?
This is one of probably not as famous as Christmas and Easter, but probably one of the most, famous stories people know about Jesus.
Mhm.
He comes in, he sends his disciples ahead of him, go to the village, ask for this colt that's never been ridden before. If anyone asks you, you say the Lord needs it, which is a very funny thing because if you see it in the context, it's talking about Jesus, but it could mean God needs it too. And so they bring the colt to Jesus, and he rides on it. And then people just start throwing down their cloaks and taking palm branches and praising him. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory to the highest. It's kind of like one of those scenes, in a movie where suddenly everyone starts dancing and you're like, did they choreograph this? I mean, they didn't, but
There's quite a lot of pageantry to this.
these people in Jerusalem, many of them have heard about Jesus. Now, here comes Jesus, and they're excited. They're like, what's he going to do for us? I think there's also another element to this, which we've discussed a lot, and that is they think he's their savior. And they think that in a very particular political way. Blessed is the king. So this is an entry of a king. This is how you would greet someone who is going to overthrow the Romans and, take care of you.
Absolutely. They're heralding him as their revolutionary monarch.
Absolutely.
And Jesus plays along with this to a certain extent. I don't mean to say that he ungenuinely presents himself as this revolutionary figure. That's not what he's doing. But he acknowledges, yes, this is how the Messiah is going to come into Jerusalem. I'm just going to turn out to be a very different monarch, a very different king, very different Messiah than who you have expected me to be. There's a prophecy in the book of Zechariah in the Old Testament. Zechariah 9:9 says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The context of this in the book of Zechariah is Zechariah has been describing Israel's campaign to conquer all of Israel's enemies. And so after verse after verse after verse of Israel being triumphant at last over her enemies, you have the Messiah, the arrival of the Davidic king who is going to restore the line of David, fulfill the prophecy found in 2 Samuel chapter 7 that God makes with David, that his throne will be established forever. A promise which has been interrupted by the conquering of Israel and Judea by empire after empire after empire. Zechariah is foretelling the end of that, and the crowning moment of that campaign is the arrival of the Davidic king on a donkey in Jerusalem. Jesus has to have known about this passage from Zechariah. He knows what he's doing. He knows that he is claiming to be the Messiah.
Yes, I think that's one of the things about this that we as sort of modern readers don't quite catch is these sayings, blessed is the king who comes in the name of the Lord. the colt, one that's not ever been, used before, coming into Jerusalem. All of these things, even how Jesus responds to the Pharisees, which we'll get to in a minute. All of these things, it's like as if he was referencing Shakespeare. So everyone would be like, "Oh, that's kind of like the Lion King, how it has a little bit of Shakespeare in it." They would see it and they'd say, "I know exactly what he's referencing."
Oh, wow. So Jesus arrives in Jerusalem. He's claiming to be the Davidic king. And just one other note here, I think. There's a lot of doubt and skepticism. Some of it justified, I think, and some of it unjustified about the historicity of much of the gospel accounts.
Hmm.
In particular, Jesus's words, his sayings, his teachings come under a lot of scrutiny, people say, as these stories were told and passed around in oral history and then finally written down around the years 70 to 100, 110 of the Gospels are written. It's a long time after his death in 33, a long time after his public ministry begins in 30. Can we really trust what he's reported to have said in the Gospels, et cetera, et cetera? There's a lot of skepticism about that. Some of it, I think, okay, sure. Some of it, I think we are subjecting Christian texts to levels of scrutiny that we don't subject other ancient texts to, that we assume are relatively trustworthy. Perhaps they got a couple of little details wrong, but we're not nearly as skeptical of those
Oh, yeah,
texts as we
absolutely.
are the Gospels. But I'll leave that to one side. This event here has nothing to do with what Jesus said. This is something that actually happened. Something that we know actually happened is because it has what scholars call multiple independent attestation. It is recorded in all four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Multiple independent sources, because we don't think that all four of those Gospels had the exact same sources. Matthew, Mark, and Luke clearly shared a lot. They shared a lot of sources. John seems to be, John has stories that occur nowhere in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, so John's using other sources. The triumphal entry is in all of them. We know this happened. And because of that verse from Zechariah, because of this is the Shakespeare of their day, everybody would have known what was happening. There was no doubt Jesus of Nazareth claimed to be the Messiah in the
Hmm.
first century.
Hmm.
No doubt. That happened. That's history.
Yes, absolutely. That is. I just want to throw one more thing in there
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
really
We
quickly.
keep trying to move on from the Palm
I know,
Sunday
but
story.
it's
We
so
can't.
good. It's
It's
so
so
good.
rich.
It's so right. The Pharisees, they're there, and they also know what Jesus is doing.
Good.
They
Yep.
know what he's doing, and this is not good for them. This is going to upset the Romans, and the Romans have given them just enough power to kind of do what they want to do, to still kind of run the show, as it
Mhm.
were. If the Romans were to be upset or to think that there's some sort of revolution about to happen, they would squash that down immediately. And that could mean taking away the power the Pharisees have.
Yeah.
So the Pharisees see this and they think, oh, no. They're like celebrating this guy as a king. Like, oh, are the Romans watching this? Oh, no, what are we going to do? So they say that to Jesus. They say, teacher, order your disciples to stop. No, not just what this is saying for all the Jews that are here who know these references, but what about for the Romans who are seeing this? They might not know the references, but they know what a king is. And they know a king is opposed to Caesar.
Yeah.
They know something's going on there. And I love Jesus' response because it's a throwback, of course, to the Old Testament,
Mhm.
to Habakkuk. And he says, I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would shout out. And there's a long sort of history throughout the Bible of the earth crying out to God on behalf of us humans that couldn't quite do it right, But in particular, this reference to Habakkuk is talking again about the triumphal return of the Messiah, but also it's a response to concerns that at the time the Jewish people had when they were still, I think, Babylonian captivity at that point, which was, why are you letting these wicked people cause these problems for us? Why are you letting them win?
Mhm.
Right? And so this in Habakkuk, this is where God says through his prophet, look, they will have their justice in the right times, right? And the faithful will receive their rewards.
Mhm.
But you have to be patient. Time is coming. I kind of love that Jesus slipped that in there, because if you were someone there listening, you'd hear that and you'd think, "Ah, we're going for those Romans." But that's not what he referencing the Messiah. His reference to Messiah is the suffering servant. And it's going to completely change how you read all of these stories.
Yeah, that's really good. The folks who are throwing their cloaks on the road, praising God with loud voices, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord," they all expect Jesus to go and conquer the Romans. Instead, he calls out a reference to this obscure prophet through whom God says, actually, the evil are going to win for a little while. You got to be patient.
It's a long, long game.
I mean, if people are surprised at Jesus at this point that he's not going to conquer the Romans, it's because they haven't been listening to him. But then again, the text of Luke has said over and over and over
They
again,
don't understand.
they don't understand.
They
They're either
don't
not
understand.
listening or they don't understand. It's not because Jesus didn't try to tell them, right? He's been saying over and over, the Son of Man is going to suffer. The Son of Man is going to die. And on the third day, he's going to be raised. And they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't get it. It is noteworthy, I think, that the first thing Jesus does in Luke after he enters into Jerusalem is he weeps over it. He weeps over it. He says, "Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation." Not only does Jesus enter into Jerusalem and fail to conquer the Romans, fail to even try, he says, guess what, guys? Jerusalem's going to be destroyed.
The opposite of what he's supposed to say.
The opposite of what he's supposed to say. It's the opposite of what he's supposed to do. He doesn't go in with a sword. Instead, he cries.
Instead, he comes in weeping for what's going to happen.
He doesn't come in and kick the enemies out of Jerusalem. He says, you know what? The enemies are going to conquer Jerusalem.
The enemies are going to conquer. Even more so. Even more so. Not only does he do that, but he goes after the people who are part of the temple culture.
He goes after the Judean establishment.
Why would he do that, right?
He goes after the religious leaders. He goes into the temple. Okay, so this is the second temple. The first temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. The second temple was rebuilt. He's standing in the midst of this rebuilt temple that the Judean establishment is so proud of.
The pride and joy of the Judean community.
Absolutely. Verse 45 of chapter 19. Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold, saying to them, "It is written, my house should be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." And that's all that Luke gives us. There are longer versions in Matthew and Mark. It's those longer versions say that he turned over the tables. He was physically violent. I was talking about this in our Bible study that we do at St. Barnabas on these texts. And we were reflecting together this morning that this is the first time he turns physically violent. He's a straight talker. He has some pretty strict and severe things to say to people, but he's never physically violent until this moment. And he turns over the tables, according to Mark and Matthew. It says to drive out those who sold. What it means to sell in this case is these are people who are selling animals or grain or incense. They're objects with which people could make the temple sacrifices. And perhaps he calls them a den of robbers because they were cheating people. It's like, never exchange currency in an airport. You're guaranteed to get ripped off. Well, these are people who are ripping other people off, and Jesus just couldn't stand that was happening in the house of God.
Absolutely. I mean, that's very much what it was. If I remember correctly, which I might be wrong, they had to use special temple coins to pay for these things.
Yeah, there's a temple currency.
Temple currency. And so it was like exchanging your money for the temple currency. So we've got the first exchange of money, and then exchanging that for the offerings that you have to bring, right? And so many places for people to make money.
Yeah, and exploit people.
And I think that really obviously upset Jesus.
And he drives them out, according to Luke. He goes on to say he teaches daily in the temple, and the chief priests and the scribes and the principal men of the temple. I love that translation. Principal men of the temple.
Yeah.
Were seeking to destroy him. but they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. So again, like the Pharisees at the triumphal entry, these are the folks who are trying to keep the delicate peace between the people and the Roman occupiers. They're nervous about Jesus. They seek to destroy him. They want to take this guy out, but they can't because there are too many people around him.
And the people love him.
And the people love him. The people totally love him. Now, why they love him is another thing. I mean, I kind of think Jesus of Nazareth at this point in his earthly career is like a car accident that you just can't look away from, because it's not like he's got nice things to say. We come to this wild parable known as the parable of the wicked tenants.
Oh my.
He's teaching in the temple, and he says, a man planted a vineyard and let it out to tenants and went into another country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat the servant and sent him away empty handed. So he sent another servant, and they also beat and treated him shamefully and sent him away. And so he sent yet a third. This one they also wounded and cast out. And then the owner of the vineyard said, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him. But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, this is the heir. Let us kill him so that the inheritance may be ours. And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, they said, surely not. But Jesus looked directly at them and said, what then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Jesus, I think, Jesus is the beloved son who has been sent again to the people. And they're going to they've mistreated all these other servants, right? The prophets, etc. And then they get his beloved son, and they don't just mistreat him, they kill him. Yet the stone that the people have rejected, that's going to be the cornerstone. He's going to be the cornerstone, the very one that they cast out. He's not coming to fix everything, or really, he's not. At least not in an obvious way. This guy has come to die and then mysteriously to become the cornerstone of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, and we get at verse 19. The scribes and the chief priests realized he told this parable against them,
Oh, wow.
and they wanted to lay hands on him at that very hour, but they feared the people, right? So this is like the moment in like a TV series season where we're like 2 or 3 episodes away from the finale, but things are really starting to build up, and that tension and that big fight, the big conflict's about to happen, and they're just kind of plotting like, how are they going to do it? That's where we're at right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. They will eventually figure it out, and eventually Jesus is going to be left alone, and Jesus is going to be betrayed by somebody in his inner circle, and it's at that moment that they pounce. But they got to wait until that moment. Right here, he's still got too many people who are around him.
Too many people around.
We get this interesting teaching about render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Jesus is going back and forth with the scribes and the chief priests. They're trying to trip him up. They're trying to get him to say something to provoke the Romans, and Jesus refuses. When we read this with the staff, Reverend Phoebe, our fabulous associate rector, because I was talking about, Jesus being so clever to give the people a nothing burger, this sort of enigmatic phrase that could be interpreted to mean whatever you wanted. Render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Phoebe basically said, I think it's pretty clear. This is not that unclear. It's not that enigmatic. He's saying, pay your taxes, even if it's to the Romans. Pay your taxes, people. And then John Ford, a fabulous member of that parishioner Bible study I was speaking about, he said today that Jesus is fine rendering to Caesar whatever is Caesar's, including taxes, because what's really important to Jesus are the things that are God's. It's not that earthly concerns aren't important to him at all. He heals people. He exorcises demons. He shows people new life during his earthly career all over the place. He does do that, but he always does so with an eye on the kingdom of God. There, he relativizes the significance of things like, paying taxes. He's like, okay, pay your taxes. That is a temporal, earthly concern. Just do it. Just follow the rules, and then give to God the things that are God's. He can say that even when it's the Romans, even when the Romans have mistreated and abused his people, his own people. He can say that because he prioritizes the things that are God's so much.
Mhm, mhm, and that's, I think, the salvation of these people, their soul.
They were not able, according to the verse that follows, in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. So Jesus lives to see another day.
Yes, yes, he does. I love this. They were trying so hard to catch him, and he just kept outsmarting them. I'm sure they were just so frustrated.
Totally.
Why couldn't they just get him to say something?
So it brings us to chapter 21.
21.
In the end times, Jesus foretelling again the destruction of the temple. He's foretold the destruction of the temple a couple of times here in an oblique way, the destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem.
Mhm,
I think we got that with Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. You can read the master in the parable of the wicked tenants
mhm.
coming and destroying
Yep.
the
Vineyard.
tenants to give the vineyard to others, is foretelling destruction of the temple. In chapter 21, verse 5, he's standing in the midst of the temple watching people make offerings. And he says, as for these things that you see, the days will come when there will not be left here one stone upon another. He foretells the destruction of the temple again. And the guy was right. The Judeans led an insurrection against the Romans in the year 70. It was
Mhm.
one of several wars between the Jews and Rome, and they lose. And the Romans, to make clear who was boss, they tear down the temples. Jesus was right; not one stone was left upon another.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's interesting about this is as he's telling everyone this time people respond by saying, "So when's this gonna happen?"
Yeah,
Right?
true.
So usually they respond like, "Oh no, that can't be true." But this time they say, "When?" It's like they're gonna schedule it in their calendar.
Teacher,
Something.
when will these things be? Yeah.
Yes, which is quite interesting, but it leads into this discussion of the end times.
I think that the destruction of the temple is a kind of, which actually did happen. He doesn't answer them and say, well, it's going to be in the year 70.
Right.
He instead says, see that you're not led astray, for many will come in my name saying, I am he, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. I think he's saying that there are lots of things which are going to take place. They're going to be hard. The destruction of the temple in the year 70, which is coming upon those of you to whom I am speaking right this moment, that's only going to be one of them. That's a pattern of everything in this world coming to an end. And I think what's powerful about this final teaching on the end times, he talks about the destruction of the temple in 70. He then goes on to foretell wars and persecutions. He again says that Jerusalem's going to be surrounded by armies. Its destruction will come near. Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles, the Romans. He says that there will be cosmic signs. There's going to be cosmic distress
Mhm.
signs in the sun and the moon and the stars and on the earth. Distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. And then this is verse 27 at the end of all these foretellings of all these things which are going to be destroyed. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, all these destructions, straighten up and raise your heads because your redemption is drawing near. When we hear these things, it's easy for us to be terrified because it's like Jesus is saying, hey, all these bad things are going to happen. And that is important because guess what? Bad things are going to happen.
Yes.
And the God of the Bible never promises to keep all of those bad things from happening. Quite to the contrary, Jesus is saying, hey, these bad things are going to happen.
Mhm.
They're going to happen. They're going to happen to you. They're going to happen to those whom you love.
Mhm.
That is hard, but that is what Jesus says. That is the God of Jesus. He says, everything comes to an end, but I am going to make, the Son of Man is going to make every end a new beginning. So that when these things begin to take place, when things come to an end, relationships, marriages, churches, nations, lives, when anything comes to an end, straighten up and raise your heads because your redemption is drawing near. He turns every end into a new beginning. That's what he's been doing all along because God is going to come to an end in him when he dies. And then there's going to be a new
There'll be a new
beginning.
beginning.
That's what he's up to.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think um reading this again now as we're thinking through it, it's kind of a throwback to my obscure verse from Habakkuk.
Yeah, it
where
is. It
where
is.
he, evil's gonna win for a while and it's gonna look like they're winning and they're winning. but not forever. There's going to be a time when it stops. Nation will rise up against nation. Woe to those who are pregnant, to
Mhm.
those who are nursing infants in those days. They'll be in great distress. All of these things. But your redemption is drawing near.
That is a very Advent word. So even though we're approaching Good Friday in the, in the narrative, that's really a very good Advent word. Is that every end is a beginning. We're gonna get next week into Good Friday and Easter. It's gonna get worse before it gets better.
We got to get to that finale.
We'll see you next week for the final episode of this first season of For Better for Verse. We'll be off for a couple of weeks for the new year before we launch through the whole of the Bible, but we look forward to that very much with you. Please like, share, click subscribe, however it is that you get your podcast. Help us to share the good news of the God of Jesus Christ with a world in sore need of him. And until next time, God bless you.